My name is Madison Keller, and the day my baby shower got hijacked, I learned that some parents don't just play favorites. They run their whole family like a stage show, and they decide who gets the spotlight before the curtain ever rises. I was 27, 7 months pregnant, and I had finally started to believe the hard part was behind me. Not the pregnancy itself, not the nausea or the swollen ankles or the insomnia that turns nights into long, quiet interrogations. But the hard part of my life that had always felt like a second job, managing my parents. I'd spent years trying to be the easy daughter, the one who didn't complain, the one who didn't embarrass anyone, the one who quietly absorbed the sharp edges so that family gatherings could stay smooth on the surface. I thought I could do that one more time for a baby shower. I was wrong. I live in Columbus, Ohio, with my husband, Aaron. Aaron is steady in a way that makes chaos look embarrassing. He's the kind of person who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't need to. He's a project manager, the type who turns problems into lists, lists into steps, and steps into results. When we found out we were having a girl, he cried quietly in our kitchen like he was trying not to disturb the moment. He said he wanted her to grow up feeling safe. I said me too. And for once I meant it without a caveat. My mother, Diane, has never liked Aaron. Not because he's done anything wrong. Diane doesn't dislike people for what they do. She dislikes them for what they threaten. And Aaron threatens her favorite arrangement, a world where Diane is the center, the authority, the narrator of everyone else's life. My father, Mark, isn't a villain in the loud way. He's a villain in the quiet way, the way that looks like passivity but functions like permission. Mark has a habit of watching Diane do damage and then blaming the damage on whoever reacts. He calls it keeping the peace. It's not peace. It's a system. Haley is my younger sister, 3 years younger than me, and she has always been the sun in my parents' orbit. Diane used to joke that Haley came out smiling. Mark used to call her our little light. They still do, even though she's 24 and treats responsibility like a rumor. Haley is pretty in an effortless way that makes people want to give her more chances than she's earned. She's also good at being charming when it benefits her. She knows how to tilt her head, laugh at the right time, and make a mistake look like an accident. Growing up, Haley's messes were always phases. Mine were character flaws. If Haley got a C, Diane said the teacher must be unfair. If I got a B, Diane asked why it wasn't an A. If Haley forgot a birthday, Diane laughed and said she was so busy. If I forgot anything, Diane called me selfish. Haley's dreams were funded. Mine were less realistic. Haley's emotions were respected. Mine were inconvenient. I left our hometown, a small suburb outside Dayton, the minute I could. I went to Ohio State, worked part-time, took out loans, and graduated into a job market that didn't care about my feelings. That was a relief. Work might be hard, but it's honest. You show up, you do the job, you get paid. You don't have to decode whether you're loved that day. I built my career in marketing analytics, and I got good at proving things with data. Patterns, timelines, receipts. I didn't realize I was training for my own family. When I got pregnant, I told myself I would keep my parents at a distance. A polite, structured distance. Phone calls on Sundays, visits with clear start and end times. No spontaneous drop-ins, no open-ended family weekends, where Diane rearranged my kitchen while making comments disguised as jokes. I thought I could manage it. Then the baby shower came up. My best friend Tessa offered to host it. Tessa is the kind of friend who doesn't just show up. She builds the whole stage and makes sure you're standing on it. She knows my history. She knows Diane's patterns. She knows that I grew up in a house where praise was a scarce resource and blame was handed out like candy. Tessa works in event planning, and she has a gift for making small spaces feel intentional. She found a private event room in a cafe in German Village. Warm brick walls, big windows, soft lighting. The kind of place that makes you breathe slower. The plan was simple. A Saturday afternoon, light snacks, gift opening, photos. A guessing game about baby names. Most importantly, it would be calm. Aaron's mom, Marcia, was coming, along with my coworkers and a handful of cousins I actually liked. Tessa sent invitations digitally and asked for RSVPs. She made a group chat for planning, but she didn't include Diane. That was intentional. Diane has a way of making every group chat about her. She asks too many questions, offers too many helpful suggestions, and somehow the entire plan becomes a referendum on her taste. I told Diane about the shower details and told her she could just show up and enjoy. Diane said, of course. That word, of course, is often a lie. Diane has a history with my milestones. At my graduation, Diane showed up late, marched down the aisle while people were trying to listen to speeches, and sat down loudly. When I walked across the stage, she was texting. After the ceremony, she hugged me for a photo, then immediately pulled Haley forward and told everyone in earshot that Haley would probably graduate early because she was the smart one. That was the day I learned celebrations in my family were not about the person being celebrated. They were about the person my parents wanted to spotlight. 2 weeks before the shower, Diane called me. Her voice was sweet, which meant she wanted something. She said she was so excited to become a grandmother. She said she had been shopping for the baby. She said she wanted to help with the shower. I told her the shower was handled. I told her she could just come and enjoy it. There was a pause, the kind that feels like a door closing slowly. Then she laughed and said, of course she just wanted to contribute. She asked if Haley could come early to help set up because Haley loves decorating. I said no, and I made it sound casual. I said Tessa had everything under control. Diane's voice cooled instantly. She said I was shutting family out. She said I was letting outsiders run my life. I told her Tessa was family in every way that mattered. Diane didn't like that. After I hung up, Aaron watched my face. He asked if I was okay. I said yes, but my stomach tightened. I didn't trust that fine. Diane never accepts a boundary the first time. She waits for a moment to step around it. The week before the shower, Haley started posting heavily on social media. She had just started dating a guy named Kyle, and she posted pictures like their relationship was a movie trailer. Champagne glasses, rooftop views, captions about new chapters. Haley's relationships always have new chapters. They rarely have endings. They just dissolve into the next thing. I didn't pay much attention. Then, on Thursday, Tessa texted me something that made my blood run cold. She had received an email from a vendor claiming to be my mother. The email requested a theme upgrade, a new banner, a new centerpiece arrangement, and a new announcement moment built into the schedule. The vendor, thankfully, was cautious. They wrote to confirm. Tessa asked me if I had authorized anything. I hadn't. Tessa called the vendor and told them not to do anything unless it came from her. Then she forwarded me the email. It was from Diane's real address. The subject line was something cheerful, like exciting surprise. The body was worse. Diane had written that the shower would now be a double celebration because Haley had news, and it was important that everyone know. Diane attached a mock-up of a sign. It read, "Welcome, baby," and then in large letters, "Haley." Underneath, in smaller letters, it said, "Ann Madison's little one." The design itself was a message, Haley-centered, me as a footnote. Tessa called me immediately. I could hear anger in her breath. She asked if I had changed the plan. I said no. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from a room down the hall. I told Tessa I would call Diane. Tessa told me to breathe first and decide what I wanted. That question mattered. What I wanted. I wanted a baby shower that wasn't turned into a theater. I wanted my pregnancy to be mine, not a prop. I wanted my daughter's first celebration to be safe. I wanted my parents to stop treating every moment like a competition between sisters. When I called Diane, she answered on the first ring. She sounded pleased, like she had been waiting for the moment I found out. I asked calmly why she had contacted vendors. Diane laughed like it was a harmless misunderstanding. She said she thought it would be cute to make it a double celebration because Haley had news. I asked what news. Diane said Haley was basically starting a family, and it would be lovely to surprise everyone. I asked if Haley was pregnant. Diane paused, then said it was too early to say, but there was something. I told Diane no. I told her the shower was for the baby Aaron and I were expecting. I told her she could come as a guest, but she could not change the theme, the signage, or the focus. Diane's voice cooled instantly. She said I was being ungrateful. She said she had paid money. I told her she could get a refund or donate the decorations to someone else. Diane said I was embarrassing her. I told her she would embarrass herself if she tried. Diane then used her favorite move. She brought up my tone. She said I sounded hostile. She said pregnancy was making me sensitive. She said she was only trying to make the day special. I told her the day was already special. I said the only way it becomes not special is if she turns it into a fight. Diane ended the call by saying she hoped I would be nicer in front of guests. That word, nicer, always meant quieter. On Friday, Tessa confirmed she had locked the vendor plan. She had instructed the cafe coordinator that only Tessa could authorize changes. She had also warned the staff to refuse outside deliveries unless Tessa approved. She told me she had never been so proud to be controlling. I laughed, and it was the first real laugh I had that week. For a moment, I thought maybe that was the end. I underestimated Diane's commitment to control. The morning of the shower, I woke up early. Not because I wanted to, but because my body wouldn't let me sleep. Pregnancy does that. It turns your brain into a radio that won't stop scanning for static. I looked out the window and watched sunlight spill across our backyard. Aaron was still sleeping, one hand resting on the blanket, like he was holding the space where I had been. I felt my daughter move, a small roll, a gentle reminder that someone else was living inside me, depending on me to keep her world steady. I whispered to my belly that we were going to have a good day. I tried to believe it like a promise. We arrived at the cafe at noon. The room looked perfect. Soft pastel decorations, a simple baby girl Keller banner, cupcakes, fruit trays, a table with gifts. Tessa had done everything with care. There was a guest book where people could write advice for motherhood. There was a small station where guests could decorate onesies. It felt warm and safe. For 10 minutes, it stayed that way. Then Diane and Mark arrived. They were early, which they never are unless they are trying to gain control before others arrive. Diane walked in carrying a large box, like it was a crown she couldn't wait to place on someone's head. Mark followed with another bag, his expression neutral, his eyes already scanning the room like he was looking for the easiest path out of conflict. Haley walked behind them, wearing a tight dress and a smile that looked rehearsed. Kyle, her boyfriend, was there too, holding a bouquet and looking slightly uncomfortable, like he had been told to do a job without being told why. Diane pointed to the gift table and asked where she could put her surprise. Tessa stepped in. Tessa's smile was polite, but her posture was firm. She asked what the surprise was. Diane waved her hand like it was obvious. She said it was a family contribution. Tessa asked to see it. Diane bristled. She said she didn't need permission. Tessa said she did. Diane looked at me, waiting for me to override Tessa. I didn't. I looked at the box. I asked what was inside. Diane said it was a sign. I asked what it said. Diane's smile tightened. She said it was sweet. I told her we already had a banner. Diane laughed and said this one was better. Tessa told Diane she could leave it sealed until after the shower. Diane didn't like that, but she couldn't argue without looking suspicious. She placed the box by the wall, still too close to the center of the room. More guests began arriving. Aaron's mom, Marcia, came in with a gift basket and hugged me gently. Marcia is warm but observant. She asked how I felt, and when I said good, she studied my face like she was reading between lines. 2 of my coworkers arrived. My cousin Lena arrived, smiling. The room filled with chatter. Diane watched it like a director watching actors take their marks. Then she made her move. She waited until almost everyone was there, until the room was full enough that attention could be pulled. She clinked a spoon against a glass, not the gentle kind, the kind that demands silence. People turned. Tessa looked at me with a question in her eyes. I felt my stomach tighten again. Diane raised her hands and smiled widely. She said she was so grateful everyone had come. She said motherhood was the most important role in a woman's life. She said she wanted to share something special before we started games. She pulled Haley forward and placed Haley's hand on her own stomach, like she was setting a scene. Haley's eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled, and the smile didn't reach her eyes. Diane announced that there was another little blessing in the family. She announced that Haley was going to be joining the Motherhood Club soon. She said the family was celebrating 2 babies today. She said it with triumph, like she had won something. My brain went momentarily blank. Then it snapped into clarity. Diane had decided to do it anyway. She had decided to hijack the event publicly, so I would be forced to play along to avoid making a scene. That was her favorite tactic. Put you in a position where boundaries look like cruelty. Put you in a position where saying no looks like a tantrum. Diane knew I hated conflict in front of others, not because I'm weak, but because I was trained to believe my feelings were an inconvenience. She was counting on that training. Haley smiled and waited for applause. A few people clapped automatically, confused. Someone said congratulations. My coworker looked at me like she wanted to help but didn't know how. Marcia's face tightened in a way I had never seen. Tessa's expression turned to ice. I felt my daughter move again, as if she sensed the tension. My breath became shallow. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. I could also feel something else, a steady line of anger that didn't explode. It crystallized. Diane continued. She said Haley and Kyle were expecting, and they had just found out. She said the family was blessed. She said we would celebrate both babies today. She said she had prepared a surprise. She motioned to Mark, who lifted the box. Diane pulled out a large sign with gold lettering. It read, Haley's Baby Celebration. Underneath, in smaller letters, it said, and Madison's too. The font for my name was small enough to be an afterthought. The layout made it clear who the main event was. Diane held it up like a trophy. She turned it toward the room so everyone could see. She smiled at me, as if daring me to object. Haley's hand stayed on her stomach. Kyle smiled like a kid at a birthday party, but his eyes flickered with confusion. Diane looked around, waiting for laughter and applause. Then Marcia stood. Marcia is not loud, but when she speaks, people listen because she doesn't waste words. She asked calmly whether Haley was actually pregnant. The room went quiet again, but this silence was different. It was sharp. Diane laughed and said yes, of course. Marcia asked how far along. Haley's smile flickered. Haley said it was early. Marcia asked what the doctor said. Diane cut in and said it was fresh news, and they didn't want to share details. Marcia nodded slowly, then asked a question that felt like a door closing. She asked whether Haley had consented to this announcement. Diane's face flashed irritation. She said Haley was happy. Haley nodded quickly, too quickly. I realized then that Haley was not the mastermind. Diane was. Haley was a prop. Again. Diane turned to me, finally, and asked me to say something supportive. She used that sweet voice, the one that makes you sound like the villain if you disagree. She said it would mean so much to Haley if I supported her. The room watched me, and for a moment, the old fear rose, the fear of being labeled ungrateful, the fear of being called dramatic, the fear of my parents telling everyone I ruined the day. Then I looked at Aaron. Aaron wasn't angry. He was steady. He nodded once, as if to say, do what you need to do. I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I simply stated the truth. I said this was my baby shower, and it was not being turned into a stage for anyone else. I said if Haley had news, she could share it at her own gathering. I said if Diane wanted to host something for Haley, she could on another day, in another room. I said the sign was not going up. Diane's face tightened, like a rubber band pulled too far. Haley stared at me as if I had betrayed her. Kyle looked uncertain. Diane tried to laugh it off. She said I was being hormonal. She said everyone would think it was cute. She said I was overreacting. I didn't argue. I repeated that the sign was not going up. Then I did something I had never done in front of family. I looked directly at Haley and asked whether she was pregnant. Not whether she had news. Not whether she was starting a family. Pregnant. Haley's hand dropped from her stomach. She blinked. Diane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Haley tried to smile again and said yes. Her voice sounded thinner. I asked what her due date was. Haley looked to Diane. Diane jumped in and said it was private. I asked whether Haley had been to a doctor. Diane said enough. Mark finally spoke and said we should not interrogate Haley. He said it was disrespectful. He said I was embarrassing the family. That sentence hit like it always did, the family. It was never about me. It was always about the image. The family was a brand to them. And today, the brand was threatened by my refusal to disappear. Tessa, without looking at me, told the cafe coordinator to remove the box and place it in storage. The coordinator did it immediately. Diane's eyes widened. She stepped forward and tried to grab the sign back. The coordinator, politely, said, "No." Diane hissed that she paid for it. The coordinator said it didn't matter. The room watched Diane lose control in real time. Her smile cracked. Her voice sharpened. She accused Tessa of being rude. She accused Marcia of being judgmental. She accused me of being selfish. Then, in the middle of it, Lena, my cousin, spoke up. Lena asked Haley gently if she was actually pregnant or if Diane had decided to announce something for her. Haley's eyes filled with tears. Not the gentle kind, the kind that happen when you're cornered by truth. Kyle's arm slipped away from Haley's shoulder. He looked at her like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Haley whispered that she wasn't pregnant. She said Diane thought it would be a good idea to announce that they were trying and that it would make Kyle step up. The room didn't gasp in a dramatic way. It exhaled. People looked at Diane in stunned disbelief. My coworker's mouth opened slightly. Marcia's face went pale with anger. Aaron's jaw tightened. Tessa didn't move, but her eyes burned. Diane tried to recover. She said Haley was just nervous. She said Haley had misunderstood. She said she was only trying to encourage them. She said it was family excitement. She said a lot of words that sounded like excuses. Kyle stepped back from Haley. He asked in a tight voice whether Haley had been okay with this. Haley started crying. Diane reached for Haley and told her it was fine. Kyle said it was not fine. Mark tried to intervene, stepping between Diane and Kyle. Mark told Kyle not to speak to Diane that way. Mark told everyone to calm down. Mark told me I should have handled it privately. Mark told me I always had to make things dramatic. Mark told me I had ruined my own baby shower. That was when Marcia moved again. Marcia walked to the center of the room and said, clearly, that nobody had ruined anything except the people who tried to hijack it. Marcia said she had watched Madison be polite for years, and she was done watching it. Marcia said a baby shower is about welcoming a baby, not manipulating a boyfriend, not competing with a sister, and not feeding a mother's ego. Marcia didn't yell. Her words landed like clean bricks. People nodded. Someone murmured agreement. Diane's face changed. The charm slipped completely. She looked at Marcia with open hostility. She said Marcia didn't understand their family. Marcia said she understood enough. Diane then turned to me and demanded that I apologize to Haley. She demanded I fix it. She demanded I tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. She demanded I protect the family brand. I didn't. I looked around the room and saw people who cared about me. Real care, not performance care. I saw Tessa, ready to defend the boundary. I saw Marcia, furious on my behalf. I saw Aaron, steady and present. I saw my coworkers, confused, but supportive. I saw Lena, who looked proud. I realized something. Diane and Mark had power over me only because I kept trying to be understood by them. The day I stopped, their power shrank. I told Diane and Mark they needed to leave. Not in a dramatic way, not as revenge, but as a boundary. I said they had turned this into chaos. I said I was done participating in chaos. I said they could contact me another time when they were willing to respect that my child's life is not a prop. Diane laughed sharp. She said I couldn't throw them out. She said it was my family. She said people would talk. She said I was ungrateful. Mark said I was overreacting. Mark said I was being manipulated by my friends. The cafe coordinator stepped in and said, politely, that the host had asked them to leave, and if they refused, security would escort them out. Diane stared like she couldn't believe a stranger was enforcing my boundary. That was the point. Strangers enforce rules because they don't owe you a lifetime of emotional debt. Diane tried one last tactic. She started crying loudly. She said she was being attacked. She said she loved her daughters. She said she only wanted to celebrate. She said she didn't understand why she was being punished for caring. People didn't rush to comfort her. They had witnessed the manipulation, the lie, the attempt to weaponize my event. Her tears didn't work. Mark took Diane's arm and told her they should go. Diane resisted, then finally let him guide her toward the door. Haley stood frozen, face red, mascara starting to smear. Kyle looked at Haley for a long moment, then walked out behind my parents without touching her. That was the first clear consequence of Diane's sabotage. She had tried to trap Kyle with a fake baby announcement. Instead, she had shown him a future he didn't want. When the door closed behind them, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then Tessa clapped her hands once and said, "We are not letting that ruin this." She told everyone to grab a cupcake. Someone laughed, relieved. Music started again softly. People moved. The event resumed. But it wasn't the same. A baby shower is supposed to be gentle. Mine now had a scar. But scars are proof that something healed. I sat down for a moment, breathing. Aaron knelt beside me and asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know. Then I said I was proud I hadn't folded. Aaron kissed my forehead and told me he was proud too. Marcia sat beside me and took my hand. She told me my daughter was lucky. She told me I was breaking a cycle. I felt tears finally sting my eyes. Not because of Diane, but because of the word lucky. The rest of the shower went on. People wrote notes in the guest book. They decorated onesies. They gave advice that ranged from sweet to ridiculous. I opened gifts and tried to keep my mind from replaying Diane's face when the truth came out. At the end, guests hugged me and told me they were excited to meet the baby. My coworker offered to cover a project deadline if I needed rest. Lena hugged me harder than usual and whispered that she was sorry and that she was proud. I drove home with Aaron feeling exhausted but strangely lighter. That night, my phone lit up with messages. Diane left multiple voicemails. She claimed she had been humiliated. She claimed I had attacked Haley. She claimed Marcia was a bad influence. She claimed Tessa was disrespectful. She claimed she had only wanted to celebrate family. Mark sent a text saying we needed to talk. Haley sent nothing. Kyle sent nothing. Aaron asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted silence. So I blocked Diane and Mark for the night. Not forever, but for the night. I needed my nervous system to stop shaking. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Haley. It was long, and it surprised me. Haley admitted Diane had been pushing her for weeks. Diane had been telling Haley she was falling behind. Diane had been telling Haley that I was the one who got to be married and pregnant, and that Haley needed something big to keep attention. Diane had been telling Haley that a baby was the thing that would make the family proud. Haley admitted she had felt jealous. She admitted she had felt panicked about Kyle drifting. She admitted she had agreed to the announcement because she thought it would keep him close. She wrote that she hated herself for it. I read the message 3 times. I felt anger, yes, but I also felt clarity about the system. Diane didn't just favor Haley, she controlled her. Diane used Haley like a puppet to maintain the family brand. Haley had benefited from that system, but she was also trapped in it. That didn't erase what she had done, but it changed how I saw her. I responded with boundaries. I told Haley I was not her enemy, but I would not be used as a stage. I told her that if she wanted a relationship with me and my future daughter, it would require honesty and distance from Diane's manipulation. I told her she needed to decide what she wanted as an adult, not what Diane wanted for her. I told her I would not lie to protect Diane. I told her I loved her as my sister, but love wasn't a permission slip for chaos. Haley replied with a simple okay. I didn't know what it meant. 2 days later, Kyle texted me. He apologized for the chaos. He said he had no idea Diane had planned that. He said he felt sick about it. He said he had ended things with Haley because he couldn't trust a relationship built on manipulation. He said he didn't want to be part of a family that used babies as leverage. He wished me well. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of it. Diane's sabotage had not only attacked me, it had detonated Haley's life. Diane had sacrificed her favored child's relationship to keep control of attention. That is what favoritism looks like when you strip the glitter off it. That week, Diane tried to regain control by recruiting relatives. My aunt called and asked why I was being harsh. My cousin on my dad's side texted that I should forgive because Diane was emotional. Mark's sister suggested I was stressed and should let it go. The usual. People who weren't in the room had heard Diane's version. I could feel the old reflex. Explain, justify, soften, make it okay. Then I remembered the audience at the shower. I remembered that truth changes when witnesses exist. So I didn't explain. I sent a short message to each person. You can ask Tessa what happened, or you can ask Marcia, or you can ask Lena, but I'm not debating my boundary. Most people stopped after that. The ones who didn't were the ones who benefited from the old system. That information was useful. A boundary sorts relationships for you. It turns vague discomfort into clarity. It turns, maybe I'm overreacting, into, this is who respects me. A week later, Aaron and I put our boundaries in writing and tightened the practical locks around our life. We documented what happened, updated passwords, and made sure medical records and visitor lists were protected. My daughter, Nora, was born on a humid July night. The labor was long, but it was calm because I had built a wall around the room. Aaron was there, Marcia was there, invited. Tessa sent texts and memes and encouragement. Haley waited at home, as we had agreed, because I didn't want chaos. Diane and Mark did not know the exact time because I didn't want a surprise appearance. The hospital honored my visitor restrictions. When Nora arrived and I heard her cry, something in my chest released. It felt like a door opening to a life I had fought for. 2 days later, Diane found out Nora's name through a photo Marcia posted with my permission. Diane sent an email from a new address. She wrote paragraphs about how hurt she was. She wrote paragraphs about how she deserved to meet her granddaughter. She wrote paragraphs about how I was cruel. She didn't ask how I was recovering. She didn't ask if Nora was healthy. She asked for access. That told me everything. I didn't respond. Our attorney did, briefly, restating boundaries and offering one path: a supervised visit in a neutral location after Diane completed family counseling and agreed to specific rules. Diane refused. She called it humiliation. She called it control. Mark sent a separate message saying he wanted to meet Nora alone. I offered him the same condition: counseling, acknowledgement, boundaries. Mark didn't reply. Weeks turned into months. Haley kept doing therapy. She kept building her life. She got a new job in Columbus, closer to me. But she didn't move in. She didn't want to jump from one dependency to another. She started making decisions without checking if Diane approved. She started speaking in full sentences instead of apologizing mid-thought. She met Nora when Nora was 6 weeks old. She cried when she held her and said she wanted to be different. I believed her enough to keep the door cracked. Diane didn't stop trying to regain the narrative. She posted vague social media captions about toxic children and boundaries as weapons. Some relatives believed her, some didn't. The ones who'd been at the shower knew the truth. The ones who hadn't were learning slowly, through patterns, through Diane's escalating behavior, through the way she couldn't stop framing herself as the victim even when nobody had attacked her. The final confrontation came months later at my grandmother Ruth's birthday dinner, when Diane tried to grab the moment the way she always did. For the first time, Ruth and a roomful of relatives refused to play along. Ruth named the pattern out loud, Diane tried tears, Mark tried excuses, and neither worked. I repeated the rules: respect, counseling, and no access to my child without accountability. Diane stormed out. Mark followed. Haley stayed. After that dinner, Diane's influence shrank, not because she suddenly changed, but because fewer people offered her stages. Mark tried to reach out privately a few times, sending messages that sounded reasonable but never included accountability. I stopped responding. You can't build trust with someone who still thinks the problem is your reaction instead of their behavior. Today, when people ask what happened at my baby shower, I tell them the truth in one sentence. My parents tried to use my pregnancy to prop up my sister, and it backfired because the lie didn't hold under witness. The longer truth is deeper. The longer truth is that I learned boundaries don't work if you only set them in your head. They have to be spoken out loud. They have to be enforced. And sometimes the only way to protect a new life is to disappoint the people who built their comfort on your silence. My baby shower should have been soft. It became sharp. But sharpness has a purpose. It cuts through illusion. It exposes what's been hiding. It makes room for healing that isn't just pretending. Nora is 4 months old now. When she smiles, she doesn't know about speeches or signs with gold letters. She just knows she is safe in my arms. That is the only legacy I care about. My parents wanted a family brand. I wanted a family. I chose the one that protects the vulnerable. I chose the one that tells the truth. I chose the one that doesn't need a spotlight to be real.